Last week, the number of weekly reported deaths from COVID-19 was the lowest since March 2020. We have never been in a better position to end the pandemic. We're not there yet, but the end is in sight. We can see the finish line. We are in a winning position, but now is the worst time to stop running. Now is the time to run harder and make sure we cross the line and reap the rewards of all our hard work.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
The World Health Organization is declaring what it sees to be potentially the end of the pandemic. They're saying it's near.
Still, the world is reminded that this is not the time to be complacent. JC Cosico with the details.
We're not there yet, but the end is in sight. We can see the finish line.
The end is in sight. That was the statement of World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus on the state of the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide. As last week, the number of weekly deaths reached its lowest point since March 2020. WHO data shows 11,000 COVID deaths were recorded globally from September 5 to 11, 22% lower than the previous week. Weekly infections also fell by 28% during the same period. Still, the WHO warns the fight continues.
Now is the worst time to stop running. Now is the time to run harder and make sure we cross the line and reap the rewards of all our hard work.
In the Philippines, COVID infections also continue to decline. That as of September 14, average daily cases are at 2,200, down 7% from the previous week. Positivity rate, meanwhile, is at 12.5%. Earlier this week, the government has allowed the optional use of face masks in open and uncrowded outdoor areas. Local governments are now issuing their respective ordinances following the new policy. But in Manila, face masks are still required in heavily crowded spaces and during activities where social distancing cannot be obtained, just like the Feast of the Black Nazarene.
Halimbawa po, sa mga lugar kagaya ng Quiapo, Divisoria, ini-encourage po namin na sana kayo po ay patuloy na gumamit ng face mask para na rin po sa inyong proteksyon.
The DOH also reminds the public to assess when to wear or remove their face masks.
Kasi dapat turuan natin yung ating mga mamamayan na syempre pag pupunta tayo sa high-risk area, isusuot natin ang mask. Pag pumunta tayo outdoor, low-risk, tatanggalin.
But the DOH maintained it won't recommend easing face mask restrictions in schools as masking remains protective to children.
Hindi ho namin irerekomenda kahit kailan na magtanggal ng mask ang ating mga kabataan kapag sila ay papasok sa eskwelahan. Gusto ko rin lang hong puntuhin na wala hong harm na nagagawa ang mask sa ating kabataan.
The agency says it will soon issue its revised minimum health protocol guidelines following the national order easing outdoor face mask rules.
At dyan natin ilalagay kung ano yung mga specifics natin according to low-risk individuals, according to low-risk settings.
For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
To share his take on the WHO's latest pronouncements, we have with us on the show Octa Research's Father Nick Austriaco. He's joining us live via Zoom. Welcome to The Big Story, Father.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me this evening.
So, Father, this is the most optimistic we've heard. I mean, frankly, the most daring we've heard the WHO. At the same time, they're stressing that we still need to be very cautious. What do you take out of this statement?
Well, I think it's an accurate assessment of where we are as the world. Keep in mind that the pandemic is not evenly distributed across the world. So certain countries are, in a sense, more endemic than other countries right now. So, but what the WHO is saying is that looking across the world, there is much hope that we are approaching the end.
Father, you've been looking at the variants for the whole of the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about the movement of the COVID virus? How is it evolving now? Has it stopped evolving into other subvariants? And why this optimism from the WHO?
Well, I think the optimism is really the Omicron variant. So the Omicron variant is a game changer. It changed in January, and the virus continues to mutate. But the mutations appear to be just different. They're highly transmissible, but less toxic, less deadly than the predecessor variant. So we have BA.5, and there was a concern about BA.2.75, but now that there's data that shows that it's just BA.5 and BA.2.75, they're comparable. So what we're seeing now throughout the world is we have a variant of Omicron that appears to be very transmissible, but relatively mild, especially for those who are vaccinated and boosted. So I once again, I encourage all our kababayans to be vaccinated and to be boosted to have maximum protection against the Omicron COVID-19 variant.
Father, notwithstanding what Dr. Ghebreyesus said, the WHO is saying that we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they also said now is not the time to go slow. In fact, he said this is the time to run even faster. What does that mean for us? What does running even faster and working even harder mean?
So at this point, really, the singular defense against COVID-19 is our immunity wall. So it's really, really important for us to enhance our immunity wall, which is why I'm encouraging our kababayans to be boosted. And this is particularly challenging now because the story on the street is that you don't need to be boosted. It's relatively mild. And many of my friends, my family members, they're not choosing to be boosted anymore because they have decided that the cost of getting a booster is worse than the benefit. And so they're deciding, if I get COVID, I get COVID. It's only going to be mild.
But Father, isn't it contrary to what we're doing now, maskless in public spaces and running harder? Isn't that going in opposite directions? Or are we just focusing on booster shots?
So we have to focus on booster shots, but we also have to realize that as the variant becomes more and more transmissible, minimum public health standards become less effective. This is very clear throughout the world. That's why I think the government was willing to relax the outside masking requirement. There are still people who wear masks. And I think especially those who are senior citizens, those who are vulnerable, they should continue to wear masks. But I think it's also important that as we continue to the old normal, I think it's that we begin to transition, recognizing that we are moving to endemic stage. We cannot wear masks forever. And so we have to begin to prepare our people for the time when we will remove masks, as many countries in the world have already completely done.
Father, one last question. Is there anything, to Gretchen's question, is there anything that we're doing right now that is incongruous with what the WHO is encouraging us to do?
Well, again, I think we just have to push the vaccine booster program. I'm concerned that it's not a complacency. I think our kababayans have moved on from vaccinations. They're just done with vaccinations. And then the question now is, what next? What is plan B? What is plan B if our people decide they do not want to be boosted? And this is my concern, because my concern, of course, is that we cannot wait forever with masks because there are costs for masks. I think people don't realize that there are benefits for masks and we are reaping those benefits, but there are costs as well. And we have to be able to do a cost-benefit analysis every single month as we move forward, not thinking that we're going to be wearing masks forever.
A super last question to add to that. Do you think that boosters are are something that we need to take every how many months? And because the WHO was talking about the number of deaths, but they didn't mention the waves of infection. So in building that immunity wall, what would we need to do approaching the endemic?
So as we're approaching endemic, what we're seeing now is that those who were infected with COVID have a natural infection. Their protection lasts 14 plus months and ongoing. So the thought is that if you got a natural infection, that will, in a sense, provide an extra boost to your booster and your vaccine protection. So the thought, I think, is that we will not need to have boosters every year unless you are a senior citizen, unless you are immunocompromised, unless you have comorbidities. It will be something like the flu. And then what will happen there is we have citizens who get flu shots every year, but most of us do not. Most of us will get the flu. And in the same way, many of us will get COVID over and over and over again for the rest of our lives.
Okay, Father Nick Austriaco of Octa Research.
Join us in the conversation. Our big question tonight: do you think the pandemic is nearing its end? Share your thoughts on that on our Facebook and YouTube live stream, or post a tweet with the hashtag #TheBigStory. We'll be showing some of your comments later on in the program. After the break, we'll be discussing President Marcos's upcoming address before the 77th United Nations General Assembly. That and more when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Would be the largest of its kind since 1992, potentially costing the economy $2 billion a day. The White House says unions and railroads continue to negotiate in good faith ahead of Friday's possible shutdown. The World Health Organization says the world is within reach of beating the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization says fewer deaths were linked to COVID globally last week than at any time since March of 2020, when the pandemic was declared. Since then, more than 606 million cases have been recorded, with nearly 6.5 million deaths. After 2 weeks of lockdown, officials in the Chinese city of Chengdu say they will begin easing curbs. 7 districts which reported no new COVID-19 cases will see life gradually return to normal. 6 other districts will remain under lockdown and undergo another round of mass testing on Thursday. Only 35 new cases were reported Tuesday in the city of 21 million people. Typhoon Muifa has made 2 landfalls on China's heavily populated eastern coast, bringing strong winds and heavy rains to areas around Shanghai. Major container ports and airports suspended operations, along with several LNG import terminals. China issued the highest level typhoon warning ahead of the storm's arrival, the first time it has done so this year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Vonnie Quinn. This is Bloomberg.
This is AP News Minute. The coffin of Queen Elizabeth left Buckingham Palace for the last time Wednesday. The Queen will lie in state for 4 days until her funeral Monday, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to file past. President Joe Biden showcased his administration's efforts to promote electric vehicles during a visit to the Detroit Auto Show. Biden plugged the new climate tax and health care law that offers tax incentives for buying electric vehicles. Members of one union rejected a tentative deal with the largest U.S. freight railroads Wednesday, while 3 other unions remain at the bargaining table. Industries are bracing for the possibility of a nationwide rail strike.
pinpoint na yung victims ng
Viral videos on crimes involving foreigners in the Philippines were presented in today's Senate Committee on Public Order hearing. Among them was the recent incident of a Chinese national who was stabbed after being shot by a group of men inside a condominium in Parañaque. The PNP confirmed that one Chinese national died in the incident. Meanwhile, the PNP confirmed that 15 out of 29 recorded kidnapping cases are Pogo related, while others are either kidnap for ransom cases or related to gambling. The PNP identified 3 Pogo companies where they were able to rescue kidnapped victims. These include the LY Group Pogo Company, Seanway Tech Company, and the Lucky South 99 Outsourcing Inc. in Pampanga, where 43 Chinese Pogo workers were rescued on Wednesday. 2 of the companies committed to help resolve issues on Pogo. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
that are not.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is set to fly to New York on Tuesday to attend the 77th UN General Assembly. To tell us what we should expect during the event, we have with us live via Zoom mobile journalist Judy Baiza. Good evening, Julie.
Good evening, Gretchen and Roby. Yes, President Bongbong Marcos will participate in the 77th UNGA. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the President is set to tackle his administration's priorities, which include the rule of law, food security, and climate change. When asked whether or not he will highlight the issues on West Philippine Sea, DFA Assistant Secretary Kira Azucena said that the draft statement that the DFA prepared for the President, there is a very strong question on the rule of law and the role of UNCLOS. However, usually the President's speeches are vetted by the Office of the President.
I mean, that's quite a number of things. Julie, what do we expect the President to actually focus on when he addresses the UNGA?
He will focus on food security, on the issues on food security and climate change, Robbie.
Are there any plans to resolve the current contempt order versus President Marcos and their family? Is that on the agenda?
Well, according to Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles, the issue on the standing contempt order is not part of the agenda of the President's working visit to the United States.
Okay, but Julie, in the meantime, since he's already in the United States, what else is going to happen beyond the UN? Is he going to meet, for example, President Joe Biden?
Well, the DFA said that consultations are ongoing for a possible meeting between Marcos and Biden. Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, is personally dealing with the matter. But as of now, there is no final announcement or final meeting yet.
Okay, maraming salamat, mobile journalist Judy Baiza.
In other news, a barangay in Talisay, Cebu just passed an ordinance to keep their e-bike drivers smelling fresh all day long. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual gives us the front seat to the story.
Barangay officials from Pook and Talisay, Cebu just passed an ordinance that requires e-bike drivers to follow good hygiene practices, such as bathing regularly, applying deodorants, and making sure that they are not drunk.
Para sa ating mga magsasakay, mga aming mga gastituin at saka mga estudyante sa elementary, sa high school na hindi. Kasi bagong ligo yun at mga estudyante, yung driver natin, babaho. Hindi pwede yan, ma'am.
Fortunately, e-bike drivers in the barangay seem to have no problem with the passage of the new policy.
Kasi ako, namamasahero ko araw-araw. Marami ang mga pasahero na nakasakay sa akin na nagsusumbong. Bakit meron kayong klaseng driver na ganyan, nangangamoy alak, tapos mabilis magpatakbo?
Aside from the bad smell ruining the passengers' day, being drunk on the road is a big no-no. That's why the e-bike drivers themselves have this to say to their colleagues.
Para sa mga kasamahan ko, mga e-bike driver dyan, tayo magpakabait na, maligo na tayo araw-araw para din sa ating pangangatawan niya.
According to Barangay Pook's official Facebook page, violators, especially those with smelly armpits, will pay a fine of 100 pesos for the first offense, 200 for the second offense, and 300 pesos for third offense. They will also face the risk of having their e-bikes confiscated and brought to the barangay hall if they continue to ignore the order despite several warnings. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual, We Are One News.
Well, we're smiling, but punot dulo naman dyan is you don't want drunk drivers, diba? So I think it's a good word.
Them keeping their hygiene in the midst of public transportation, I think it's just the right time given that we're trying to go maskless. Nakakatulong yung mask para wala kang maamoy.
Question lang is paano mo i-implement?
Kung paano nila huhulihin. So paano yun? Aamuin ba nila lahat ng driver? But it's a good way to discipline the drivers. I'm not sure though if we can have that nationwide.
Okay, we'll have
Might
to
be difficult.
We'll have to see. In the meantime, right after the break, Filipino pole vault legend EJ Obiena is finally home after a stellar season in Europe. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
My wallet, my car keys, my backpack, and my jewel.
If you weren't doing it, you were a freak. I seemed cooler, more mature because I did it. I started vaping and juuling when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school. All my friends were doing it. It was on social media everywhere, basically.
Well, I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and I remember seeing this and being like, oh my God, why do you have that at school? As time went by, I became more normalized to it.
My friend, she was like sucking on what I thought was a USB, and she was like, oh, it's like flavored water vapor. It's like so good. You have to try this. You have to try this. And she pulls it out, and that was the first time I've ever seen a Juul before.
We knew it was like a form of smoking. More and more kids started doing it, and then it was just like widely accepted at that point.
And someone from my first period, and then someone in my second, third, every single period just started popping up with Juuls.
Nobody knew what it was. Not one person knew what it was.
Parenting alert this morning.
The FDA warning about
vaping in the news. Teen vaping epidemic. Vaping throughout the night.
Everything quickly became not enough. I had to keep hitting it because I'd built so much resistance up to it. I was so addicted that I couldn't quit, so I asked my other friend to buy me cigarettes.
And I got sucked into the same trap as the rest of my classmates. So about 2 months ago, I woke up feeling pain on the right side of my chest.
So I started having really bad heart palpitations, and I couldn't breathe.
We ended up going to an urgent care. I was admitted, and they told me that they thought I had a form of like a diffused lipoid pneumonia.
It felt like I was having a heart attack. A team of surgeons just rushed into the room. One grabs my arm, the other one puts an oxygen mask on my face. Immediately, I saw the lead surgeon above me just saying, "Your lung has collapsed and we have to rush you into surgery this moment." They had to put a tube in the right side of my chest in order to reinflate my lung, praying that everything was going to be okay.
And the panic attacks got so severe to a point where I sat down and I wrote out all of my funeral plans, to the casket color, to the songs and the pallbearers.
You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. As tributes continue to pour in for Queen Elizabeth II, the Haraya Choir, composed of Filipino and British members, gave their own tribute for the UK's longest reigning monarch. Jay Orense with this report.
Nothing can describe an emotion better than hearing a music. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away last week, a sea of flower offerings blanketed the front side of the palace. There were letters and other items as well. But for a group of Filipino singers here in the UK, the Haraya Choir, which is a British-Filipino choral group, they have chosen a different way of paying their tribute to the Queen, and that is through their voices.
Dahil lahat kami nalungkot na nagtapos ang isang parte ng history na simbolo siya ng continuity. So parte siya talaga ng buhay dito, parang ever present, at isa siyang malaking inspirasyon sa aming lahat in terms of yung balanse ng tradisyon at progression.
Most members of the group are either from the IT sector or the medical industry. They have felt the love of the Queen, especially during the years of the pandemic.
We want people to think that even though this is a sad time, na there is a rainbow, there's something beautiful out there, na things happen for a reason, na tapos na yung time niya, it's time for a new beginning, a new hope for something exciting, a newer modern monarchy, and also look back then sa mga accomplishments in the past.
Nagulat ako sa isang banda, pero parang nasurpresa ako dahil sa ganung edad niya, nagampanan niya pa yung tungkulin niya.
Reporting from London, United Kingdom, Jay Orense, News 5.
For the big story in sports, after a stellar season in Europe, Filipino pole vaulter EJ Obiena is taking a much-deserved vacation in the country before starting his build-up for next year's competition, as well as the 2024 Paris Olympics. Marty Bautista with the story.
World number 3 pole vaulter EJ Obiena has arrived in Manila this morning to finally get some rest after his 21-day outdoor campaign. Obiena was last home in the country in 2019 when he effortlessly notched gold in the 30th SEA Games hosted by the Philippines. The 26-year-old athlete finished his season with 6 golds, 1 silver and 1 bronze, including an upset of world number 1 Armand Duplantis of Sweden. Obiena's latest feat was a gold medal at the Gala dei Castelli in Bellinzona, Switzerland, after setting a new tournament record of 5.81 meters.
My coach said we're going to try whatever we can to the end of the season, and hopefully my ranking would stick, and we'll have a good more build-up going to Paris.
The Pinoy pole vault ace brought along his family and his German girlfriend, long and triple jumper Caroline Joyu. The two are hoping to visit the country's pristine islands during their much-needed break. Being an athlete herself, Caroline is no stranger to the sacrifices EJ had to endure to get to his current ranking.
I know how he feels, and we talk a lot about this, and when then something works and it pays off what we all trained for, he trains for, then I'm really, really proud, and he deserved that a lot.
Obiena made headlines earlier this year for his rift with his mother organization, Patafa, specifically its head, Philip Huico. However, he noted that his relationship with Patafa has since improved with the new chief at the helm.
Mr. Terry Capistrano was the one, if you guys remember, made sure that I have poles in Tokyo. He's one of the few guys that I'll be seeing and having quite a good chat. So looking forward to that.
Obiena, meanwhile, has met with newly appointed Philippine Sports Commission Chief Noli Iyala at the Rizal Memorial Stadium. EJ is hoping to make the best out of his 2-week break before flying again to Rome on October 1 to resume training with coach Vitaly Petrov. He is set to begin preparations for the qualification tournaments essential for his 2024 Paris Olympics bid. For News 5, Marty Bautista, We Are One News.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, Business World Online. You may also log on to OneNews.ph for more in-depth analysis. I'm Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Hall. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.